Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The United States just announced the expulsion of South Africa's now former ambassador to Washington, Ebrahim Rasool, on the grounds that he is a hater of its people. And President Donald Trump, analysts are saying that this development could be a likely precursor to the Trump administration's wider policy on Africa. Already, there seems to be a clear enough handwriting on the wall in support of this position, with the American president's apparent disregard for African leaders right from his inauguration for a second time as the supposed leader for the free world, for what Nigeria and indeed Africa should be looking forward to from the Trump administration. We're now being joined by Dr. Sam Amadi, Executive Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Great to have you on the morning show, Dr. Sam Amadi. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, OJ. Well, it's director, not executive director. I'm not an executive.
All right. Well, you will be executive very soon. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Dr. Sam Amadi. Well, we all know that President Trump has, fallen out with President Cyril Ramaphosa since his return to the White House. And so some critics have argued that the decision to expel Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool is politically motivated. Others have argued that Rasool's comments about Trump and the U.S. policies justify the response he got. Now, I would like for you to assess how this expulsion will affect U.S.-South Africa relations, especially given the existing tensions over, land reforms and the ICC case against Israel.
Well, thank you. I think clearly the expulsion will further, ratchet up the tension between the two countries. But first, I think really let's put in brackets Trump's the previous bad feelings or comments about South Africa and the issues. But I think the South African ambassador basically, interfered inappropriately in the internal affairs of a country. I was an advisor at the Foreign Affairs Ministry under Yaradua with Chief Ojo Madekwe. It's not expected that an ambassador representing a country would make those far-reaching comments, whether they're true or false, about domestic policy of a country where he's an ambassador to. So I think, in a sense, even if there wasn't this bad blood and this strained relationship between South Africa and the U.S., that statement was totally undiplomatic and could be interpreted by any country as meddling into domestic policy. So, but at that point, so this expulsion will further kind of signals that the U.S. government does not really care much about South Africa and may be willing to further escalate the controversy and conflict with South African government. What's expected will be perhaps reciprocity. South Africa, if they still have the U.S. ambassador, could expel him. That's tit for tat. And you could see Trump, somebody who would not like blink, especially seeing fairly relatively weaker African country, could take another strike and so go down the drain of maybe diplomatic strike for strike, and then who knows where to end. So I think it could signal further breakdown in relationship, and at some point might draw in some kind of African solidarity, depending also on other factors.
All right, Dr. Amadi, thanks for that short and sharp background to it all. My question is one that I would like you to look at in two broad perspectives. How do you think that Nigeria should be looking at what is going on between South Africa and the United States? And in asking that, like I said, I would like you to approach it from two different perspectives. First will be the perspective of diplomacy. Unlike South Africa, we do not even have an ambassador yet. We have not had since September of 2023. It's only now that we are hearing that it looks like the issues around funding are being resolved, and that the next set of ambassadors will be announced. If that happens, what sort of caliber of individual do you think Nigeria should consider for the U.S., given that we're not dealing with Obama, we're not dealing with Biden, we're not even dealing with, former President Bush, we're dealing with, Trump. And I like the fact that you established how the interference from now the former South African ambassador, affected relationship, which is worrisome, given the fact that this is not a new person in diplomatic circles. He was ambassador between 2010 and 2015 when Obama was there. Now he returned in January. By March, he's out of there because he obviously couldn't moderate certain views. So what should Nigeria be considering? That's one. And then secondly, given the fact that America, particularly legislators there, are already talking, just like they did in the first term of Donald Trump, about perceived attacks on Christians in Nigeria and the likelihood of sanctions against Nigeria. How do you think, therefore, what lessons should we be taking note of in this developing brouhaha between South Africa and America, given that America already has a side eye on Nigeria in the area of how Christians are allegedly being dealt with in some parts of Nigeria?
Very interesting question. I think let's take it this way. The lessons clearly, since 2014, in my view, or even before that, Nigeria has a diminution in its foreign policy. Nigeria has not been strong in foreign policy because, of course, it takes some domestic tranquility and domestic strength to kind of execute a foreign policy, a robust foreign policy. The last we had, when I was there with Joe Medico, was what we called citizen diplomacy, with the idea that Nigerian diplomacy, foreign policy, will now focus on its citizens abroad in diaspora, they're helping them to protect their rights and again, mobilizing economic resource finance back to Africa, to Nigeria. But since we've been rather powerless because we've been struggling. You see, we lost our economic age, we are destabilized, we're not coherent as a country, and so you would expect. But South Africa has been gung-ho on foreign policy. I mean, the only country that took on the almighty US and the ICC, whether you support them or not, but that was really a strong foreign policy. It's modular and it shows articulation and coherence. And then South Africa would necessarily perhaps pay the price. So the lesson for us will be, first, that we now have a transactional leader in the US. It might not be a bad thing. It's a double-edged sword. So because in a world of increasing moral indeterminacy and incommensurability, we don't agree with ourselves, big cultural wars around liberal conservatives and so on and so forth, a transactional leader will help to, without determining these moral questions, construct some kind of bargain, modus vivendi, let live. So in a way, it could see that happen in Russia without determining the big questions around whether Russia is evil or not. It could have an end to that war in some sense. So transnational leadership in an age of moral disagreement could be a good thing. That's my major argument. But again, what that means, therefore, is you have to be very strategic in dealing with America now. The first thing you have to do is you've got to put diplomats considering their moral persuasions, their worldview, ideological leaning, and network. It's clear under the Democrats that some policy actors in Washington, in the Center for ISIS, the Council on Foreign Relations, had a big role to play. And they had their network in Africa enjoyed some, some argue that that's part of what helped perhaps the APC to come to power in 2014, 2015 through the Obama boys who helped develop a strategy. And Jonathan would argue that perhaps they beat down hard on him in support of APC or whatever. But the point is very clear. The president has to choose people who have the right network in Washington, the people not stigmatized as leftist or stigmatized as too liberal, because they're going to have no hearing in Washington. So that's the first thing. So send people who are smart, people who understand the lay of the land, people who can connect to the new conservative policy institutions and speak the language and be able to help smooth out any misconception about Nigeria. So Washington is not a place for who is my friend, who worked with me in the dungeon, in the barricade, in the 1992, that's not the point. Washington has to be for somebody who understands the language and who understands the love of the land and can connect to the emerging conservative platforms in the US. The second point then is we have to be very strategic in our dealings with issues, global issues. Take, for example, China, our relationship with China. Take, for example, our relationship with Russia. And the good thing is that since Trump is transactional, they're not going to worry so much about the fact we can cut trade deals. So we can cut deal with China, cut with Russia, cut with US. What they will not like is rhetoric. This is not a time to denounce, make statements that attack the US or make statements that are pro, the liberal Europe. This is a time to guard statements and deal more with deals and transactions. So you play under the radar. And the third point flowing from what's going on around the Christian the issue. Look, Nigeria has for long been a country of concern on religious freedom. And interestingly, this is an area I did my PhD work was half on religious freedom and legal liberality. But the point is this. If you look at Open Door is the World Global Research Institution on freedom of religion. Nigeria is always classified as one of the worst in terms of how, and primarily, the Christians in north of Nigeria. They have been badly treated over the years. We know the case of Southern Kaduna and so on and so forth. And the problem is that the Nigerian domestic policy response has been faulty and poor or even impossible. Look at the case of this Sunday, the guy who has been convicted and confirmed by a Supreme Court. Now, the legality might be okay. It's a matter for discussion. But the policies around it, the whole idea, the orchestrated process, 8 years, 6 years detention. And so when this case comes up now as a case of a Christian attacked by Muslim terrorists, quote unquote, they will put it that way, herdsmen, and he self-defense, and is now kind of tried by a Muslim, they claim it's a Muslim partner. So the narrative will go out showing that Christians are suffering. And there are some evidence, like I said, in northern Nigeria, to confirm some of those facts. So I think, don't forget that when Trump was there, Nigeria was also placed there. Obama came, the first thing Biden did was to take Nigeria out, appointed a Muslim American as the head of the all-powerful Freedom of Religion Commission. So this is politics and ideology at war. Now that Trump is back, and of course, a Pentecostal pastor is the advisor on religious council, you would expect that from the yet to be appointed the Secretary of State, Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, to some of the major functionaries in Washington, they have strategic interest in this, in what's going on in Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the countries listed with the worst human rights violation in terms of religious freedom. It's documented. There are cases even in the ICC. ICC refused to take it up against Buhari. I know about those cases. There was a Nigerian who was then in charge there who refused to take it. So there are actually evidential basis in which the U.S. legislators will push for some sanction against Nigeria. And so what should we be doing? The Foreign Affairs issued a statement, which for me was watery, because it's just the same avoidance. Oh, we are a great country, we have good religious freedom. No. I think the president should appoint a special council on religious freedom. And what should be the work? The work of that council, I've had discussion with Father Kuka many days, and we've tried to think about it. A special council on religious freedom will be somebody who has a total free prosecutorial authority to prosecute these violations, pick them up, prosecute them. So now when the state is actively responding and dealing with whether Christians against Muslims or Muslims against Christians, when the state itself is internally, its institutions are strong enough to protect its citizens, strong enough to manage religious conflict, then Washington will have no basis to classify you. But the problem is that the Nigerian institutions are paralyzed, are religiously partisan, and are not doing the job. Now, think around whether it's Deborah or the persons killed for religious issues by mob action. How many people have been transparently prosecuted and imprisoned, given the right punishment? That's the problem. It's not for, Nigeria deceive ourselves. We think we are talking to, it's an echo chamber. So if you issue a statement, you think that Washington cares. Those statements are worthless. When every day on social media, every day, these diplomats and legislators have access to the real facts about your country. So I think we need to have our policy, heads now think differently and say, look, we're living in a world where all eyes on us, where facts are available to everybody. Our first job to respond is to create domestic management of conflict. So people know the Nigerian state is not captive to religious, whether Christian or Muslim, and they know that this state, even though they're going to be violators, but the state should be able to deal with them fairly and transparently.
I like what you mentioned, because everything speaks to moving from an aid mentality to a trade mentality, to make sure that we have something that we're also giving back, so that also increases our value. Now, with regards to Trump's foreign policy lately, we know that, like you rightly said, it's very transactional. He's on a wins for America spree. But I want us to bring Doge into this, South African-born Elon Musk, and what role you think he plays as it pertains to South Africa, considering that, there's been a lot of tensions on both sides, with the ambassador also having thoughts about him. Most recently in an article accusing Trump of mobilizing a supremacist instinct, white victimhood as a dog whistle, especially during the elections. And he's also been quite vocal with regards to the fact that he believes that Trump supports genocide and that Trump has supported apartheid. So these are some of the thought processes that have been highlighted. But then responding to that, the South African government called it regrettable as to this situation and highlighted that they're still very interested in maintaining the ties that they have to the US. So elaborate on that, moving away from the aid mentality to the trade mentality, and why is it so difficult for us to have an increased reliance on ourselves as Africans? Because again, I ask myself, what truly does Trump want from Africa?
Well, very important. I think people say, those who know Trump, they say he likes strength and hates weakness. So let's take that psychoanalysis. So if Trump is somebody who, they say, cozies up to dictators, not because probably they have something on him, but I think he has a real admiration. I mean, when he won the election, he called Elon Musk. He says, come on here. This is another great star. So he sees Elon Musk, smart guy, strong guy, able to move, do the impossible, launch a rocket, get Tesla on, do multiple things. I have time to troll on world-class troll on Twitter, on X, and then he admires strength. And the problem with Africa is that we are weak. We are weak. In the past, the Europeans, the European and American left because of perhaps idealism, or because of hypocrisy, or some kind of patronizing spirit, kind of coddles us weak Africans, give us aid, make us look good, don't speak clearly about our weakness, so we look good. And that's perhaps why we like the Democrats and the liberal left, because they don't make us realize how weak we are and how perhaps despicable we could actually look. But here is a guy who, maybe because of his own moral failings, because of his own recklessness, lack of control, says it as it is. I say, look, you guys are weak, and I don't like weak people. The first thing is for us African leaders to really come to know that strength matters. Not the strength of saber rattling, of brutalizing their citizens, of holding press conferences and abusing everybody. It's a strength of economic growth. And we could do more intertrade. We could develop, we should take this as, look, Asia, East Asia, their secret was simple. Their leadership says obsession with economic growth, create wealth, be strong, look internal, and then Washington will respect you. But again, now we can also go back and say, like I said, if it's trade, then what can we trade? What can we bring to value? There are many things we can do. Think around our fine earth minerals that are now everywhere. What kind of transactions? How are we going to build a competitive advantage out of it and negotiate better? So we're not left with no option. But this calls for new realism, that this idea of looking weak and pandering on human rights and looking for support may be over. We're now in an age where we have to raise ourselves, pretend to be strong, and go to the international community with some sense of a chip on our shoulder and say, look, we can actually offer X, Y, Z. Give us the time, we're going to do it. I think that helps. Again, back to the issue about Elon Musk of South Africa, I think there's perhaps an element of white nationalism. That's fair. I don't like to talk about racism because I know that all humans are evil to an extent, and so people are going to be either racist or ethnic, tribalist, whatever they are. The clarity is that there's a struggle in Europe today about whether the Judeo-Christian group that thinks that they are being displaced and some white nationalism. So it's possible that Trump and his team have a sense of white superiority and perhaps look down on us. But that's not, for me, an issue. It has been part of history. We shouldn't forget that the best scientists created this idea of caste system that created black racism, created Nazism, South Africa, India. So there is always this history of wickedness and hatred. Our job is to come out, maximize opportunity, and create a way towards the top, and then we can sit back and get Trump to invite us for inaugurals. That's
All
how
right,
it goes.
Dr. Sam Amadi, thank you for your submission there. I mean, as we begin to wrap, I just wanted to highlight this actual fact that, we know that Trump's return to office has, been creating this diplomatic risk. His administration is reportedly considering banning almost half of African countries from entering the U.S. There are about 43 countries on that list, and 22 countries, are said to be Africans. Nigeria, or African country. Nigeria is not on that list. Now, could this be a preview of broader tensions between the U.S. and Africa? And, what impact would this have on trade, security, cooperation, and other key areas of U.S.-Africa relations? Really quickly, as we begin to wrap.
I think it might not have much to impact on those. This is basically, again, strength. Why would they ban those countries? They're at war. If you look at the red countries, they're countries that are actually at war with capacity for exporting terrorism. Again, the narrative in America, which may be wrong, is that those who come to America and stay, who come with weaker culture, they don't believe in equality of culture, actually people from countries that are notoriously weak and destabilized and poor. Look at those countries. There are countries where people have incentive to escape and stay in America. And so it's basically about taking out people from America, stopping this weaker culture from infiltrating and degenerating American or white culture. So the language is clear. I don't see it necessarily affecting trade. If we come up with something that the Americans want, Trump will buy it, they will buy it. But the point is, they won't allow us to escape from our destabilization, from our poverty, and foul their culture, quote unquote. And that's look at that carefully. It tells you countries either they are towards disintegrated, the terrorist likely place for terrorism, or countries are so poor that their citizens will take visa to escape and stay back in America. So it's a logical, consistent policy from the premise that actually we are getting people into America who come from bad places, with bad culture, with bad social capital, and who are going to destroy our country. That narrative tells you why those countries are on that list. I think it's narrow, limited. It might not affect relationship if we manage well. It depends on how we manage it. If we not see, they hate us, and start bad-mouthing them, then we can. But if we take it as just, this is what it is. Our country is weak. They don't want our people to come because they will likely stay back, which is true. Then what do we do to improve our country, and what do we do to make this place more habitable? That will be the way to go. So I think it's a narrow, clear, defined policy that comes from perhaps a jaundiced, biased, premise about who should come to America and who shouldn't come to America.
All right. Great submission as always, Dr. Sam Amadi. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on The Morning Show.